but it's infinite. So how do you even get to there? It's a
Well, because the
paradoxical.
world, it's a paradox only if you don't know anything about physics. And
How do I count from
the
1
fact
to
is
2?
that
if I don't
even
count every
like
single
most things are not continuous.
decimal in between?
Like all the things that we actually found out are quantified, right? So there exists like the smallest piece of something. So
So
you
there
can
was.
actually not. So you can actually not divide
disagree with
infinitely.
I disagree with the premise that he said something about continuous. It's more quantifiable.
Yes.
You mean discrete, right? Not
Yeah.
like quantifiable means something else. Discrete would be the opposite of continuous.
It means it's like there is the smallest piece of something that you cannot go beyond. So, for example, you can get to like the Planck length, and you cannot go beyond the Planck length. So, whenever you have something that's the length of the Planck length, you cannot divide it in.
So,
well, my issue with that though is that is you can argue that that's just an instrumental limitation and not actually some physical limit.
Yeah, right.
Well, you could, but that's the thing is, it's in quantum mechanics. When it breaks down, because this is the problem with the Planck thing, right? And you are correct. It's not necessarily a problem with our measurement. It's the problem that derives from the math of it, right? So it's like you go down to the math, and once you go below that, like everything just scrambles, right? And that's a very strong indication to the fact that everything is quantified, including space. Okay, and if space is quantified, so is time. So it's like so is everything else.
I feel like I
don't agree.
The analogy. Go ahead.
My girlfriend says average.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay. So, I feel like you're arguing from like a physicalist's perspective, Daniel. Would that be correct?
Yeah, let's say. I'm not an idealist.
Yeah, so Rothbard is an idealist, I would say, right? And I'm not really arguing in the scope of physicalism. But I mean, if you want to get into that, I can.
No, but it's fine. But it's like I'm still curious to see how Zeno's paradox actually helps the idealist's case. Well, I don't see how it actually does that.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the word gunk is going to be mentioned at some point.
Hopefully not.
So I think what Zeno's paradox is trying to say is that distance or motion in itself is a paradox. I think this had to do with the personal identity over time argument, which was that you had three axioms that you had to work with that were not axioms, but three premises that conflicted with each other. So I think the first one was the IOI, indiscernibility of identity, and the definition of that is if A and B share every single property, then A is B. Okay, and then the second one is that time exists and change exists. I think what Zeno's paradox was trying to convey is that time itself, which is a physical quantity, didn't exist. So I think the idealist, has a good argument against physicalism, which is the opposite ideology to the idealist.
Which is funny you say this, because I have sort of, without knowing about this, I have independently converged on the idea that time isn't real.
So,
what?
Yeah,
time isn't real.
Oh.
Someone go call Stephen Hawking.
I don't think Stephen Hawking ever said that.
But that's cool, Robert. I've never met an idealist before. Everyone that I meet is either a physicalist or a dualist like me. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was a dualist for a while. I just found the position unsatisfying.
That's fair. What do you think about? Do you believe in like mathematical idealism, or I'm
a mathematical, like I'm a logical realist.
Okay. Interesting.
So, like numbers and truths are things that exist.
No, I understand that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What were your contentions with dualism, if you don't mind me asking?
My contention with dualism was that I have a couple. One of them is that there's not really a clear way in which the duality is connected unless you have some kind of unless there is because I see dualism as having an issue where there's no mediator between the ideal world and the physical world, and so it winds up in this position of these two separate things aren't connected. They don't really have a reason to be doing what they're doing with each other, and that sort of creates a bit of an issue. But then there's another issue, which is that when you go into the world and you actually start breaking things down, you can affect the mental world, right? You can affect someone's subjective experience, for example, by literally getting a stick and poking their brain with the stick. And then on the other side, you can get to points where if you dig down on the physics side of things, you can keep digging down to a point where things just start turning back into ideas. And so you can do it at both ends. And so to me, that says that, though it doesn't say which one, it sort of illustrates that one of these is the fundamental one, and the other one is along for the ride.
Yeah, so I think I've heard of this. It's called the interaction problem, I think, or the mind-body problem. I think what might you may be referring to?
Maybe.
Yeah. So I actually did have a. Go ahead.
I was going to say I don't often know the names of the different funny little paradoxes and stuff because a lot of this is stuff that I just worked out rather than finding out from someone else.
Oh, that's fine. That's how most intellectuals think anyways. They have to do it that way. But I wanted to go back to the interaction problem. You said you were a logical realist. Would you not think that maybe the logic is what connects the ideal and the physical?
Well, there's but then okay. If logic connects the two of them, what do you mean when you say that, right? Because if you take a physicalist perspective, right, logic is an instrument used for stuff to happen, or it's some. If you want to be a logical realist and a physicalist, then you would argue that the rules of the world are sort of what logic is, and so they're just an expression of the rules of the world. But from an idealist perspective, right, the logic itself is an entity that exists. Like the different bits of, and all the stuff that comes out of logic are other entities that are dependent on logic. How would you even begin to synthesize that?
Yeah, I think your last question might have hit the nail on the head, actually.
Because they arrive from opposite directions. If you're in a dualist perspective, right? What you're sort of doing in dualism is you haven't got one position. You're holding both positions, but just for some things, and you're just swapping lenses. It's the same way that when I argue from materialist perspectives, I just put the materialist goggles on, right? And then I go that way. And I have to take them off afterwards.
Daniel, do you have anything? I don't have anything right now.
Bro doesn't.
Damn, he didn't even acknowledge my question, man.
Maybe
Alright, do you guys want a new topic or?
Yeah, can do. Well, you got one?
Alright, okay, how about this one? Is morality objective or subjective? I feel like we kinda glossed over that
I mean,
earlier.
if I argue from my position, the question doesn't make. I can't argue that because from my position, that question doesn't make any sense.
How so?
Well, because I don't think objective and subjective are distinct things.
What does that
So
mean?
from my position, your experiences are actually the real things. So when you and I don't think there is such a thing as a mind independent thing, right? Because everything is all mind. So I can't have objective and subjective as separate concepts because everything that exists is in a mind.
So you just think that everything's subjective?
Well, no, it's that they're sort of kind of, like kind of.
Everything's like de facto subjective.
In a sense, yeah. That was it's sort of like everything's de facto subjective, yeah.
Okay,
But but what it also does, the weird thing that it also does is that it reframes the subjective thing as the subjective is now the real. Which means that using the term subjective and objective within my framing are just confusing. Because there's no reason to bring it up because everything's subjective.
People
anyway.
who do accept the distinction are going to say that they can say subjective things are real. They're just going to be things that are dependent on the mind. You just don't think there are things that aren't dependent on the mind or a mind. I don't want to point you into solipsism, but I mean, you could make some distinction on whether something is dependent on your mind specifically, or it's something dependent on some like deeper process kind of deal.
You guys should all thank me for thinking you into existence.
Like, is your idea? Do you know who Bernardo Kastrop is?
I don't.
Bernardo.
So I think it's a name or something, but he has like this idea where I don't know if organisms or what, but like individual people or whatever. I don't know how much he extends this to animals, but I think he does. Where they're like dissociations from like some deeper mental construct or thing. It's not necessarily God or anything. It's not even necessarily something that's aware. It's just like individual people are just dissociating from this thing. And that's what their experiences are. But I don't know what his stance would be, but like if you think morality isn't dependent on your individual subjective experience, and it might be dependent on some other deeper thing, then I guess that's like the...
Well, it's where using the term subjective becomes confusing. Because it's
I think it's just...
It's all subjective, but it's subjective, but there's a bigger thing that it's connected to for the... Yeah, like it's...
Well, the thing I think it would be is like, do you think these things are dependent on your mind? Do you think they're dependent just on human minds?
Yeah, it becomes relative to the mind, right? It's like, which mind is it dependent on? So you'd say subjective to this or whatever, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking you.
But then you can have things that are you can have things that are like omni-subjective, so to speak. So things that are true in all cases or true from all perspectives. And then someone would just say, well, that's subjective, and then they got confused.
Well, then I think it would be like equivocating over what are the words we're using in the conversation for. Because I think some people think objective means like true in all cases. Like if every human believed it, then it's objective. But that's not really.
Yeah, the definition.
Conversation.
The definition, I think, of objectiveness, especially in this conversation, probably be independent of the mind. Then probably.
Yeah. So like if they wanted to go that route, they'd just be like missing the conversation, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, how do we derive something that's independent of the mind?
Right.
Well, that's going to be like...
I think
exactly.
Ideas,
you can.
right? Like,
I can give an example. I think something called the coherence theory of truth, which states that to determine truth, if A and B are coherent with each other, there's a relationship, and I think you could use that relationship as a form of independence from the mind argument.
You're gonna like it's really gonna be dependent on if you think there's stuff independent of the mind. Like Rothbard doesn't, but if you're like seemingly like a physicalist, or you think there's something outside of your mind, then we might say like there are things that are not dependent on your mind, and go from there. I imagine Rothbard or idealists are going to say, well, the only way you're going to establish that is by like appealing to stuff within your mind. But seemingly if you're a physicalist, you're going to accept that you appeal to things in your mind. You only have access to like your experience, but it wouldn't necessarily entail that there's not things that are outside and independent of your mind.
That's understood. Okay. Interesting.
I've actually forgotten what
morality is a social construct.
Good. That's a discussion we can have actually.
Yeah. So, what are we saying? Like it.
I mean, it might be dependent on your view, but I think I might say that social structures have influenced our moral intuitions, just because our moral intuitions kind of affect how we exist. within those social structures. So certain moral intuitions are going to be more selected for, so to speak, than others, right? Like, so if you're like a psychopath and you lack these moral intuitions, maybe sometimes in some areas you do well, but in like a lot of areas, people don't tend to like to be around psychopaths. You know, people tend to like to be around people who recognize and like empathize with them, and they may just not stick around in those populations.
Well, but humanity has always been waging wars, and war and violence have been a natural part of humanity. So most people today won't say that is moral, like killing other people in general.
Well, actually, it might even depend more. Like a bunch of people are going to say certain killings are moral.
Hey, I'm the guy that says certain killings are moral.
Like I think the vast majority of people would actually say, yeah, sometimes killing is morally justified. And
do you think sometimes war is morally justified, even though there will be almost always be civilian casualties?
Where is this?
Yes.
Yeah, like Ukraine didn't have a choice in the matter. Maybe this will spawn another thing, right? But like Russia attacking Ukraine could just say, well, I don't think it's moral to kill these Russians coming into our border. I think it's bad, right? But that's not going to stop Russians coming over the border and killing them. And so I'm not going to exactly like that Ukrainians have to pick up guns and shoot at people invading them. But I completely understand it, and I'd say it's morally justified. I have an intuition, being very accepting of that.
Violence is inherent in human nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and would you agree that violence is morally wrong?
No,
not
inherently.
I think there are plenty of times when one should be violent.
A lot of this is going to probably be dependent on your moral framework. That might be more important for us to start with. Like, I kind of take a more emotivist stance. I think a lot of what we're doing is we're just, when we talk about what we think is morally good or bad, is we're just expressing our attitudes towards these things. Like, we like these things.
I was like that for a little while. I've more moved on to a goal-oriented view.
I think you can have a goal-oriented view, but I think ultimately we can ask the question why do we care about these goals? And you're gonna round out and say, well, I like these goals, and I think that's fine. Yeah.
So, Greenpilled, are you a virtue ethicist by any chance?
I don't know. I don't know that word.
You don't know.
I am.
Yeah.
So, take this as an example. You'll place emphasis on character traits. Like courage, as an example, is virtuous underneath the Stoic system of virtues.
I mean, I might have some, positive intuitions towards things like courage or something, but I don't think it'd necessarily be a universal. Like, if someone was very courageous about being a Nazi, I still might think they're a piece of shit.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that super answers the question, but
no, it does. It does. You said it wasn't universal. I think that more than answers it. Thank you.
I don't. See, I'm definitely not. I'm not convinced that something needs to be universal to be, to be good.
Oh yeah, I don't think so either. I think. I mean, this is going to be probably. When I say I think these things are subjective. I think they're dependent on our mind, our specific mind, and I think humans by and large share a lot of these intuitions just because of the nature of us being a social species and us kind of evolving in groups. But I think ultimately they're just dependent on your individual mind and kind of deal. So even if it's not universal, you can still just appeal to these are the intuitions that I have and go from there.
Yeah, so basically some theistic arguments say well, when you say that you're appealing to your intuition, then it holds no content initially. It holds no metaphysical content. So you're not really can't really hold any belief under
it doesn't hold metaphysical content.
Yeah, I'm just confused too. I left I kind of just like don't like compete with people like that.
I think there's some theists, and it's not even just theists, there are atheists too, that think metaphysical is like, they think it's like something separate from physical, but like physicalism is its own form of metaphysic. And so like when I express like these are just the mental attitudes I have towards this thing, I am expressing something that like I'm holding as like exists metaphysically. They just believe in something different. And I think
it's just a misunderstanding of the word.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
It comes to metaphysics. Yeah.
What they'll like some of the people will have like a tendency to equivocate what like philosophers mean by this word, and they try to like say pull in, okay, this is what philosophers mean by metaphysics, but then I'm going to bring all this baggage from my worldview and say you don't believe in the metaphysical, when really what they mean, you don't believe in this spiritual thing that's in my worldview. And of course I don't believe in that thing, but to equivocate to what like philosophers mean is like very different kind of deal.
There's a lot of definitions of metaphysics. Some say it's the word meta means beyond, I believe.
It does, yeah.
Derived from some ancient Greek word. And you would just say it's beyond physics, but I think there's several other definitions compared to that, right?
Well, I'm going up with like
the
encyclopedia thing, right? Like so, like if you look it up, physicalism is going to be like a metaphysical theory. It's even though you're like only subscribing to like physics and physicalism, it's still a type of metaphysic.
Well, it's the
metaphysics is a definition in philosophy, right? And it just examines the fundamental nature of reality. That's all it means, literally. So, and the fundamental nature of reality is just the physical, right? So that's the metaphysics of reality. It's all physical.
And there are some people that basically use the word to basically kind of refer to something akin to dualism. I wouldn't say it's exactly dualism, but they're saying like, at least how classically dualism is used, but they're saying there's this other stuff, and it's like spiritual or whatever. I won't put words in their mouth and saying like they know or have a concrete idea of like what it is, but there is this other thing separate from the physical. But if I'm a physicalist, I don't believe in that. But it's not to say that physicalism isn't like a metaphysic as described.
The way some people are using it, they're using metaphysics as like a counterpart of physics. Of physical.
Yeah,
so that's why.
Yeah, it's
just a bit icky.
It's a huge problem, I think, with like a lot of discussions. It's not just something with philosophy. It's just I think when like academics in like whatever field tend to try to have very specific meanings to specific words. They don't want like it's colloquial usage. Meanings will just change over time because people aren't exactly forced or incentivized to stick to specific meanings, and they just kind of move with the crowd as people get older and new people get into these discussions. So the definitions just kind of change over time, but academics don't. So you just have a tendency for people to accidentally equivocate a lot with these words. You see it with like with physics, with observation. Physicists are talking about something very different than like what we might talk about when we say we observe something. Biologists mean something very different from fitness than your average usage of the word fitness, and it just makes sometimes conversations difficult.
Yeah, that is true.
Are you a bachelor's green-pilled in philosophy?
No, I have a bachelor's in biology.
Did you take philosophy as like an elective, or
only like one philosophy of I forget if it was science or biology class? I honestly wish I took. Yeah, I wish I took more classes in it. I started trying to learn more about it after I graduated, but I wouldn't say like. I'm sure there are many things that I'm misunderstanding, if that makes sense.
Just by what I heard, it sounds like you're very like you're a physicalist, is what I
I definitely
Guessed.
lean towards physicalism. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think your biology background influenced that?
Maybe in part. It could just have been my background in general.
Right.
Because you know, my father was essentially a physicalist. I talked to my dad, predominantly about these ideas. So, if I had someone talking to me about idealism or dualism all the time, maybe I would lean towards that. But I've looked at some of the ideas for it, and I'm not particularly swayed by them. And it's not to say that physicalism has like perfect non-knockable down arguments, but it seems to me it kind of makes more sense. And when you look at ideas for arguments for dualism or for idealism, I'm not particularly super swayed, but it's not to say that I've seen every single argument for either of them.
Understood. I do have one question. Naturalism and physicalism, they're not the same, right?
No. I think Graham Oppie. Well, so Graham Oppie, I think, is not necessarily. He might be a physicalist about the mind, but I don't think he's a physicalist about all reality. But he's still a naturalist. I don't exactly know what naturalism means. I asked him at least under his view, I asked him what he meant by it. And I forget exactly, but I left kind of unsatisfied. The more I think about it, the more I don't know exactly what people are referring to by natural and supernatural. So I don't know if I could give a super great
naturalism kind of says there is no supernatural, right?
But that's
as a philosophical stance, it's
But that's not very informative. That's not very informative.
Well, it kind of is. It kind of is.
Here, if I asked what someone meant by supernatural, and they just said not natural, right? And so we go in this big circle where naturalism is not the supernatural, but supernatural is not the natural, and I have no idea.
Because it's a different ontological category, right? So it's like what naturalism says as an ontological category. All you have is the natural stuff, right? So everything that there is, and everything that there will be, is going to be natural. And
but I don't know what I can put into these categories. We have some ideas, right? I can start putting. Okay, but if we can put everything in here, and if God is a thing, then God's just going to be natural by that definition. Yeah. It wouldn't be supernatural, right?
It doesn't need to be supernatural.
Yeah, but the thing is it just, to me, it just doesn't seem like, if you have a category that's just everything, then to say there's some other category would just be a really weird category error.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Well, I mean, no, but it is in contrast. It is in contrast with people that did say there is such a thing as supernatural, right? So even if you think about it as being, kind of weird because it's in contrast with something, I think it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because as long as you're going to have people claiming there is such a thing as supernatural, I think it's it's okay for some people to say no, there isn't. All there is just the natural stuff.
Yeah, but seemingly there are people who are going to say they don't agree with your definition of natural being everything. They're going to appeal to something maybe they'll appeal to ghosts. They're going to say ghosts are supernatural. Now, I think that this issue I think is problematic because how ghosts are described, we might just be able to describe them if they exist physically. They seem to be extended within time and space if you hold the physicalism. Crossbird, I don't know exactly what your view would be, but but seemingly there's an issue there. And then if they go to the God part, they're going to say God exists, but they're it might just be a huge semantic issue, and I don't know, because you can look at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They don't even attempt to try to define natural. They're there's
a lot of terms in this world that are hard to define, right? And you said you're in biology, right?
Yeah.
For example, in biology, how do we define life? What is life? And it's we kind of know what it is, but it's really hard to actually define very clearly. Because you're gonna go to the points where the distinction between life and non-life is going to be pretty murky, right?
Yeah, but I can't even start to delineate some kind of blurry line here, especially when you say natural is just everything. If it's everything, then there is no other category to be discussed at all.
Yeah, but
Like-
this is what I was saying. It's like you're thinking about it as like this is what came first. I don't think it did. So what came first was some people saying there is such a thing as supernatural, right? And I think naturalism was just like a natural, a response to that type of thinking that there is something that's not natural.
If I may
Yeah.
as well, I feel as if saying, I'm trying to think of a way to actually put it, stating that something is natural doesn't inherently mean that it can also be cannot be unnatural. So, for example,
Well,
you look
that's what
at-
it means.
just one moment.
No, it would be
Just-
cardboard. Don't
wait.
don't. It's like we're having a conversation. You interjected.
Well, no,
And
it's
like
an
you
open
can't say something
conversation.
is natural
Both
and
species.
unnatural at the same
Like,
time, right?
If you just let me elaborate on what I'm saying, you'll get what I'm saying, man.
I'm
So
getting what you're saying.
You can have an instance of something where it could be mutually both. So if you look at like the trash islands in the middle of the ocean, people would say that plastic is unnatural, but the reason why that trash is all collected in one place is natural because of the effects of the waves and the current. So then, how do we
I'm sorry.
define
This is
things that
exactly
overlap?
what we were discussing because it's down to the definition of what is natural, right? I
So
mean,
that's
yes,
what
of
that's
course.
what I'm saying. That's why I'm
But
trying
they
to.
can't be both at the same time.
Oh my goodness! That's why I'm trying to say when he just mentioned the murky grey area.
I was mentioning.
So I'm trying to give in a real life, real world definition as to where we have an overlap as to, well, this can be considered both or neither.
No, it cannot be considered both because they're exclusionary terms. It's like something is either natural or unnatural. This is the thing. It can't be both, right? It can be. It can only be natural according to one definition and unnatural according to another definition, right? But if you're using the same definition, it cannot be both things at the same time.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like an equivocation because I think like what you're referring to with the plastic islands is kind of operating under the definition of like using natural and unnatural in terms of human intervention or action, and how naturalism is put under philosophy is not really referring to that, because if we were using that definition, most physicalists just wouldn't be naturalists because they're going to hold to things that exist without humans, like the Big Bang happened without humans. It led to Earth. It led to humans existing through evolution, and all of those things happened without humans, or something. Or maybe I butchered that probably, but I think there's just two separate like ideas floating around. I don't think. I think when people argue over supernatural and natural, I think there's just more substantive things to talk about because I think really like they're just referring to like something else. Like if they think ghosts exist, for example, they just think there's like some other thing that exists, and maybe it does fall under the laws of physics in some way or some kind of law. But if it doesn't, then they're gonna have to like argue for something else. But if we go under what Daniel gave as naturalism of like everything, ghosts are going to be natural, gods are going to be natural, and I just don't know. I just think the category itself is poor. At least when we're
I don't
referring
think
to
poor is necessarily the way. It's non-specific, but we're trying
that
to
might
put
be
it in
what I mean.
specific terms.
That might be what I mean. Like I mean
look,
like
it's
in
like
this
you can.
discussion, like
So
I think
you
even,
can look at natural. So just a second, you can look at natural because you could have like a definition that just says, everything operates in accordance to the natural laws of reality, right? Like
what is natural? Like how does a law?
like the laws of reality, right? So it's like we have gravity and electromagnetism and so on, right? These are like the laws of nature, right? So when you're saying, like, for example, this would be one definition, right? If you're a naturalist, you're going to say everything that exists actually has to operate according to these laws. There's no one thing that actually operates outside of these laws.
What if there's other laws that we haven't accounted for, though?
Well, then they'd just
Well,
be on the list of laws.
Those laws, like for example, there might be a natural law that we haven't discovered yet, But for example,
your knowledge of the laws does not
that-
change whether
Yeah,
or not they exist.
that
Yeah,
law
but
would also just a second. That law would also like affect everything that we already observed and that is already affected by the other laws too, right? So let's say we have the 4 fundamental laws of nature, and then we discover like a 5th law, right? Just because we don't know about it right now, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect everything that we see.
We don't invent laws; we find them.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
well,
that's why I said discovered.
it might be.
Did I say
Yeah.
something else?
But
No, that's what
I meant discovered it.
adding to what
Yeah.
we're saying.
my worry, I guess, is that like if like I don't know what it might mean to not like fall under these laws. I mean, maybe like if we take like quantum mechanics, and I'm not exactly super knowledgeable on it, but like if there isn't really any way to determine which, like, I don't know, like I was recently watching something with like the Bell inequality. If there's no way to determine which light particle is going to be captured by a filter or not prior to measuring it, then there isn't any law dictating like
but there
which one is
no.
no. Well, if there is, then you'd have to like back some kind of hidden variable idea, and if there isn't a hidden variable, then there isn't a law that you can show that will dictate a specific particle is going to go through a filter or not. It's just going to happen at like
so
probabilistic.
the big problem. So when it comes to quantum mechanics, like one of the biggest problems is not that there is no law. It's just that we have a really hard time managing to look it up, right? It's like to understand the variables.
That's the hidden variable idea, right?
No, it's not. It's not hidden. They're not hidden. We're just like we're unable to get to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but no.
Like,
yeah, so like
we can't get there. So for example, you know
there's two ideas.
Just a second. Like like in quantum mechanics, one of the base laws is like you can't know the position of a particle and the speed at the same time, right? That's the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics. It doesn't mean a particle doesn't have both a speed and a position. Obviously, it does. It's like what we have a problem finding both at the same time. So the uncertainty principle doesn't mean a particle only has one or the other. No, a particle has both. We are just unable, with our current technology at least, to know both at the same time.
Well, this is the thing with the Bell inequality. If you hold that there is something that we could know to know which one of these particles at any given time is going to go through the filter or not, then you'd have to hold that there is a hidden variable, because that's the only way of you like squaring that there is a law to determine these things, is to say that there's a hidden variable that we don't know about. But the whole point of the Bell inequality is it just doesn't seem like there is a hidden variable.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I don't know exactly where the hidden variable is. I don't really understand your argument.
So like I was watching a video about this. So like there's like these filters that for light that polarize the light and only let certain types through, like certain angles or whatever. Normally when you have one, you can put it through and like 50% of them will come out the other side. You turn it like what is it, like a 45-degree angle, and it like halves, like, and you have like two filters now, and it like, I forget it exactly, but it like halves them or something. But you put a third in there and you make it 22.5, and now suddenly you're getting like 85% of the particles through. And it really just, I wish I had the video on me that I could give you, but like it really, it doesn't add up that there's it doesn't look like it adds up as if there was a hidden variable. It seems like something else is happening.
Daniel, have you ever heard of the hidden variable theory about quantum mechanics?
No.
So there are two main interpretations of quantum mechanics: the probabilistic one and hidden variable, which is like super deterministic. Hidden variable says there are some variables we don't know.
I understand.
Yeah, so that's what he's talking about.
But I thought it was resolved, and there is.
No, I think most physicists will hold probabilistic interpretation.
Yeah.
But some people are still.
Again, I'm not an expert in quantum mechanics, but if that's what you're talking, as far as I know, it's just like the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics, and I thought it was already demonstrated that's the case, but maybe there's like a fringe.
Well, if it's probabilistic and you can't actually determine which one of these particles is going to go through the filter or not, then there isn't a law governing it. Like at least these
but there
specific
is.
particles. There's a probabilistic notion of it, but for each
that's
of these
also that's
specific,
still a law though.
No, but what I'm saying is for these specific particles, like if I just like looked at one photon going through these filters, I wouldn't be able to know. I couldn't possibly know whether it's going to go through the filter or not.
No, you would know for the particle. So just there's a difference there. You would know for a particle, right? So whenever you have a particle, you could know it, right? If you just have the particle. The problem is
not
that
if the probabilistic
forget that
notion
light.
is true.
Well, light is not just a particle, right? Light has a particle wave duality to it, and the problem comes is like when when the particle actually starts behaving like the particle and starts behaving like the wave, then that's when you have the probabilistic nature of the whole thing, right?
So
but if you could actually technically have like just one photon that you're going to observe, right? And it's just that photon, yeah. Like the double slit experiment, for example, if you're like literally just observing the photons, right? And obviously I'm talking about observing it in the physics way, because you're collapsing the wave function, right? You're collapsing the wave function, you're observing the particle. Literally, that's a particle, it's not a wave anymore, right? And when it's a particle, it just behaves like any other particle ever.
So I posted it. I posted the video that I recently watched about it, but in the side chat. But the issue I'm having is that it seems like the only way that you'd be able to tell if a specific photon is going to pass through the filter or not is if you hold to a hidden variable idea. If the hidden variable idea is just wrong and there are no hidden variables, at least ones that are going to determine if it's going to pass through or not, then it literally just isn't the case that there's a law governing this specific photon for it. There will be a probabilistic notion for all of it, but if there's no law there and you're saying all these things are governed by laws, then like each specific interaction may not be seen as natural under the definition you gave.
But again, it can be a probabilistic law.
Why can it be a probabilistic law? Yeah.
It's the same. It's like it doesn't break
there
anything.
Can be a probabilistic over many, but I'm saying there wouldn't be one over one. You wouldn't be able to determine.
What do you mean? Of course it would.
Again, I think the issue is like you're not going to be able to determine it. Like you're not going to be able to like.
Probabilistically, you will be able to determine it probabilistically. So
not with one.
You will have like a specific. Yes, you would. What do you mean? Also, it's like you keep saying like this particle, for example, is just like alone in the universe. There's not just a universe where you only have that one particle. It's like there's interactions between everything, right?
Yeah,
there is no such thing as like nothing, right? Like that particle that you're seeing, it's not like it's not interacting with anything. It's like you're constantly, like even in the void of space, you have,
I know there's
the energy, like virtual particles that are coming in and out of existence, right? So it's like because it's interacting with the quantum field, right? So it's like you're still having those interactions, like regardless, right? So it's that's what I'm saying. It's still probabilistic, and it would even affect one particle. Like yes, I don't see a problem with it.
All I'm saying is that it just seems like under the definition that you gave, like these specific interactions, like these individual ones that wouldn't be dictated by hidden variables, just they wouldn't necessarily fall under this law. It seems it just seems to like be a definitional issue in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't see what the issue actually is, because I understand you have an issue with this, but I don't know. It escapes me what the issue actually is. Yeah, I don't see an issue in that at all.
I don't know. I feel like I said it a couple times. I just think that I think if you can't determine it here, then it's like hard for you to like say that there's a law that's got.
I think you're having a problem with the word determine, because when you say determine, you want something exact. And yes, in quantum physics, you might not have something that's super exact. You might just have a probability of something happening. That's still a law that applies to.
Yeah, systems. I think there's a distinction to be made between deterministic laws will determine completely 100% predictability will give you that knowledge, and probabilistic laws that are predictable by some framework, but not completely. But they're still not completely random. They're still governed within some framework. So it's just a probabilistic law, but I don't know why you call it notion.
Maybe, but like even if I grant this, it still feels like the case like where the earlier conversation was, it still feels like the case that there just isn't a huge distinction. And if you gave this definition for natural, for someone who's like holding to a god doesn't seem to like push any conversation forward, because like they're still like they're gonna say their god's a thing, and even though they're defining it as supernatural, how you gave a definition, they're just gonna say, okay, well, by your definition, my god is natural, but I'm gonna still say he exists, and he exists in X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, but also like naturalism, in a sense, it's the standard position that one should have, right? Because you're just saying, okay, it's like all we see, for example, all we have evidence of is natural stuff. We don't have evidence of anything that's not natural stuff. We don't have evidence
but
of,
again, but
we
like
don't have evidence of
definition-
anything that is not behaving according to the laws of nature, right? Basically, so I think it's on